Hello and welcome to another episode of the EV Charging Podcast. I'm Dan.
I'm Jeff.
And our podcast, as always, brought to you by Solar Choice, Australia's only instant quote comparison service for solar, batteries, EV chargers, heat pumps, and aircon. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing well. And I should point out that we're dialing in from different parts of Australia today. I'm up in northern New South Wales, you're in central west New South Wales, and our guest is joining us from Adelaide.
That's right. 3 different locations, 3 different weather zones, I think. And while it's great to be able to connect online, next month we'll be all back together in one place. We've got a bit of a special event coming up for our next episode in May. We'll be doing a live recording at the Smart Energy Council conference and exhibition, which takes place in Sydney on the 6th and 7th of May. Jeff and I will be on stage with a guest or two doing a live recording in front of an audience. So I recommend you come and join us for the live recording and see what else is going on in the energy space. And then the month after that, another special event, we'll be doing another podcast from the sidelines of the EV Charging Infrastructure Summit, taking place on the 10th and 11th of June in Sydney.
Yeah, exciting, Dan. We're doing our first live eps, saving some money on the studio fees, but more importantly, having a chance to get face-to-face with our audience. So anyone that wants to say good day or ask us a few questions, I'm sure we'll hang around after both of those recordings to chat with anyone that wants to talk to us. But if we come back to this week's episode, we're talking to a guest, Matt Downie, who is one of the founders of V2Grid. And they hold an interesting record of being the first EV charger company to have a bidirectional charger approved in Australia by the Clean Energy Council. So one of the big steps and hurdles that needs to be overcome to enable vehicle to grid in Australia.
Yeah, vehicle to grid, obviously a term that we've talked about here on the podcast before. Anyone who works in the energy industry or in EVs in particular will know about vehicle to grid. But for any listeners who may not be across the topic, can you give us just a general understanding of what is vehicle to grid?
Yeah, so let's set the scene. So vehicle to grid, in its very simple terms, means taking energy out of your car's battery and then effectively exporting that back into the grid, usually for the assumption that you're going to make some money by doing so. So that's the concept. In Australia, there's been some hurdles that we're making progress through to make that happen. And I think, you can kind of break that down into 3 distinct categories. We've got the cars being able to play ball with vehicle to grid. We've got the chargers being available, and we've got electricity tariffs. So if we start with the cars, that's the one we still need to make a lot of progress on. Most electric vehicles can discharge. It's a capability that has been demonstrated that most EVs have, but the issue is that most warranties don't allow for vehicle to grid. So any EV owner would be effectively voiding their warranty by discharging their battery into the grid unless they've got special permission to do so through a pilot, or if they have a Mitsubishi Outlander or Ford Lightning or one of the very few models that do allow for it. If we look at the chargers, there's been the Wallbox Quasar, which, had the old CHAdeMO plug, was around 5 or 6 years ago. I don't think that's sold in Australia anymore. In the latest iteration of the electrical standards, AS4777, bidirectional chargers now being permitted across Australia. And we're expecting a fleet of chargers to be available very shortly. V2Grid, who we're speaking to today, have been the very first to be approved by the Clean Energy Council, which means they are effectively now available across all of the different networks, any locality in Australia. So that is a big hurdle, and we expect other brands to follow. So, that paints a little bit of a landscape. It is a complex area. How did I do, Dan?
I think that's a pretty good foundation to help people get up to speed for this episode. But really, we should leave the technical details to the expert, and that's our guest for today, Matt Downie.
Well, welcome, Matt Downie, to the podcast. Good to have you on the show.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me. It's been a couple of weeks in the waiting, hasn't it? But good to finally get on with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, look, just to kick things off, it'd be good to get before we dive into V2Grid and all this exciting stuff we've got to talk to you about, be good to just run through a bit of your background, Matt, because I think you started on the tools. You're an electrician by trade.
Yeah, spot on. It's about 20 years ago now. Started as a apprentice electrician, focus on the commercial sort of construction background, working a lot of tier one type work here in Adelaide, and slowly sort of progressed through through that space for probably 10 years, and then started my own electrical business back in 2016. And when you start off and you're more of a sole trader, it's tier one commercial projects in the construction industry is just not a thing. So I quickly had to sort of diverse into anything that would come my way that a one-man band could handle. So I found myself sort of quite heavily in the residential space and working on a lot of home upgrades, whether it's a new power point going in or a pendant being hung or some ceiling fans before summer. And that sort of got me into a bit of more of a diverse range of skills. And then along came this sort of, I guess, what I call the energy space. A lot of people would sort of come to, do you do solar? Do you do batteries? Do you... it's probably not until the last sort of 3 or 4 years was I getting asked much about EV chargers, but started, I guess, growing my knowledge in that space as well. And then sort of built my business, Electrical and Communications, up. We've got about 40 staff at the moment. And then rolled into a company called Bantham Australia, which we created more so for the energy space and sort of trying to aim to be almost like a project lead for clients and trying to handle that sort of end-to-end solution. We found, especially in the EV charging space, from like a public side of things, public charging space, I should say, is it almost became like its own little building site, but it was very much around like an electrical scope. So our clients didn't necessarily, they weren't builders, they weren't electricians, they weren't skilled up to be able to sort of run everything from, site exclusion, I guess, and bitumen, concreting, obviously the civil, the electrical, line marking, switchboard upgrades. We were working with RAA in the network rollout they did in South Australia, the border-to-border one. We did quite a bit with them. And then we did the 2 first pilot sites in Adelaide for a company called On The Run, which is a large service station company here, recently, I think, acquired or merged with Viva Energy. And more recently, we've been working with Viva Energy in New South Wales, other companies, Living Choice Australia. They're very proactive with some charging facilities across their network as well. And then, so along came, this little idea with my V2Grid Australia, with my business partner James and I, and we sort of started trying to track down bidirectional chargers and what was in the market and what would be. We obviously wanted to try and find something that was being manufactured at high quality, and probably 2 years later now, we're across the line of getting one CEC listed, and we're now starting to install them sort of throughout Australia.
Do you remember when V2Grid first came into your consciousness? Like, how long ago was it when you realised that this was coming and it was a business opportunity?
Well, James and I were working together in 2 different areas with the RAA network rollout. So we met through that, and then we kind of were like bouncing these ideas. Like, imagine if we were doing a lot of regional work. So imagine if you were going into this town which had, barely a pub and, a service station that was not active, and it was just a highway running straight through it. But we were putting in $500,000 worth of charging facilities, but then there was lots of farmland around, and we kind of sort of started like talking about, imagine if you could do this and have a bidirectional one where, there was power issues out regionally, which there is, and you could drive, and I understand you're not going to go and drive regionally just to go and discharge your car, but it's how the idea came. And we were sort of thinking, well, imagine if you could discharge your car at one of these public spaces, earn some money, help support the grid, reduce people's energy costs potentially. And that was kind of, I guess, the spark. Yeah.
And so the idea you had was, hey, there's this need in the market potentially in the future for, cars to discharge into the market. And then you've looked at the vehicle to grid kind of landscape and identified that, there's not really very many charging options. There was the wall box that kind of did it through CHAdeMO all those years ago, but there hasn't really been, there's a few companies emerging. So you thought there was maybe an opportunity to jump in there and get ahead of the pack, or is that sort of what you were thinking?
Yeah, 100%. And we were, miles too early, to be honest. But, we probably didn't realise the barriers. And I think in turn, we've probably helped break down those barriers as well. I know in South Australia, we did a heap of work with the technical regulator and SA Power Networks to try and help almost develop some guidelines around bidirectional use and processes that might need to be followed.
So for someone who doesn't have any context, let's say, V2Grid, you've put out this charger in the market. It's called the Numbat 7. Give us an idea of the specs of that charger, what it can do for, the average person.
Yeah. So Numbat 7 is what we've branded it here for Australia and sort of under our V2Grid Australia banner, a product from InfiPower, the manufacturers in China. It's a 7 kilowatt unit. As I mentioned, CHAdeMO CCS2 option. We also have two options as whether you're mainly interested as a grid discharging model, or whether you really wanted to also back your home up and sort of have what we call the V2H gateway box. So again, very similar to a solar system with a battery. Everything runs through the gateway, and you have sort of full home backup or partial home backup or just even, a couple of circuit backup that you might want to run through there. So a couple of options there as well. It is, it's about the size of a solar inverter as well, if no one's sort of seen it before. Many different options internally, you can, obviously you can hook up an OCPP sort of software to it, and we've developed one as well that you can use so we've got a home app control with it as well. So, if for some reason you're sitting on the couch and you don't want to get up and you want it to start charging or discharging, you can just hit it with the app, or vice versa.
Yeah, and the software built in enables you to operate on a vehicle to home model or a vehicle to grid model, sort of at the user's choice by the sounds.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, you've got the option on the app. You've almost got a trombone slider, whether you wanted to discharge at 3 kilowatts or 5 kilowatts, or charge at 6.2 or whatever your choice is. You can essentially scale up and down. Some people just want to try and match their export limit with their discharge from their vehicle, so they can sort of nullify it rather than discharging extra. So we've sort of got that option in there. Very simple, one pager. It's not meant to be too complicated or too consuming for the end user. So I use it quite regularly. I've got one at my home, and my wife has used it before and sort of had no issue. So it's sort of, I guess it's helped.
Must be working.
It's working.
So if we think about those two modes of operation, I'm thinking about maybe some people listening who might not really be well read on vehicle to grid and the use cases for the charger. I guess vehicle to home is a pretty straightforward one for people. When it comes to exporting back to the grid, I guess there are a few different ways to frame that. The one that we're used to hearing.
In terms of the customers that you're getting coming your way, Matt, are they interested in the vehicle to home mainly, or is it sort of there's a lot of interest in vehicle to grid and people are kind of sitting on the fence waiting for this automation to come into play before they they make the leap to buy the hardware?
I feel like the people that have been riding this wave for the last couple of years are like all V2Grid. Like they just want to earn some money, and they've generally got a full energy system already on their home with lots of automation and stuff like that. I've got an EV and a bidirectional charger, and I'm still paying $300 to $400 electricity bill. Oh, sorry, I was paying. Now I'm basically paying nothing, and it's massive for me and my family, because that was $300 to $400 a month as well, not a quarter. So it was good money that we were paying, and now it's sort of nothing, which is what really excites me. It'd be great to be able to sell back and earn a couple $100 as well, but I'll get to that eventually.
Yeah, fair enough. And so tell us a little bit about the relationship you've got with Mitsubishi. It looks like they've sort of partnered directly with you. Yeah, we're interested to know how that came about and how that's been working with the charger.
Yeah, look, it's been good. It's been a process, that's for sure. And because obviously, Mitsubishi Outlanders have been capable of bidirectional use for quite some time now. It came about just through some marketing of our own, and the guys at Mitsubishi sort of reached out, and we had a number of meetings with them, still having a number of meetings with them, and we've recently installed one at their headquarters here in Adelaide. So they're doing a lot of their own sort of testing with. I guess like anything, like this could be a really massive opportunity for them, and I believe they see that's the case. So, they're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's just to make sure it's commercially viable for them as well. I think Mitsubishi can really lead the way with this. I think they do have a good model, be the Outlander being a plug-in hybrid. I think it really covers all bases. People can still travel and tow and don't have the range anxiety, but can also use that 22 kilowatt battery whenever they want, whether it's to run their caravan because they have gone camping, so there's some great use for them. Obviously, as things progress and you've got a BYD with 80 kilowatts of battery, that's pretty powerful as well. But,
well, I mean, 22 kilowatts in a hybrid is still bigger than, your average home solar battery. So, there's certainly enough power there to make a very big difference. And so what's the use case that Mitsubishi themselves are interested in? Are they looking at cars that they own for sort of a corporate benefit, or is this something they want to package up and be able to offer to customers coming in looking at buying a new Outlander?
Yeah, they've looked at I think they're looking from many angles. Yeah, I think the package for their customers to purchase an Outlander is definitely a big one for them. I think like any EV OEM, sales is just massive for them. They just want car sales. So what way they get that, they're creative with it. And I think like this offers a really good solution. Now they sell 1,000 a month across Australia, which is big numbers. Does everyone want bidirectional? No, but could they? Yeah, maybe. Imagine if 200 people wanted it as well. To go from 1,000 to 1,200 charges a month is pretty substantial, and if you add that up over 12 months, it's a hell of a lot more cars. So, yeah, look, I think they'll look at it from their own commercial fleet side of things. Potentially, they'll look at it for their showrooms and reducing some energy costs for running their showrooms because they've got them connected as well.
Good luck with that, Matt. It certainly makes a lot of sense. Like I could see that, I think it's probably not that well known that the Outlander is one of the few cars that does permit bidirectional charging. And that is an enormous point of difference because there's, 30, 40, probably more EV brands now in Australia, and every single one of them, you'll avoid the warranty at the moment, with Outlander being the exception. So as you mentioned, we know through the Solar Choice website, there's an enormous amount of interest from consumers on vehicle to grid. So if they can, capture that angle of being one of the few ways in which a customer can get out there already, then they can surely pick up a lot of early adopters.
Yeah, 100%.
So I wanted to ask you as well, Matt, about InfiPower. So that's the company that you've partnered with to bring this charger to the market. They're a big, Chinese electronics company, but I imagine you would have probably canvassed the market. How did you come across InfiPower? Maybe you can share a bit about them for someone who hasn't, come across them before.
Yeah, sure. We did. We essentially didn't just cover the Chinese market as well. We sort of went through Europe and pretty thorough check around, while we could only cover so many kilometres, you generally had a pretty good idea on the best people to go and check out. And unfortunately, I think none of the European ones were quite ready or as high quality as some of the Chinese ones. And, InfiPower was probably the one that was the most progressed with it. Yeah, I mean, the relationship's pretty good with them. They're trying to help us grow it in the market as well and try and, like the EV OEMs, they want more sales and so on. So we're, we're working on that, but also we can only work as far as we can because of the vehicle sort of, roadblocks at the moment.
Are you able to give us an indication or a ballpark of how many units you've sold, how many are out there right now being used?
Yeah, we've sold about 40 now. So we've got a handful at our warehouse at the moment that are about to go in for install. We've got a few on order still coming over. We're manufacturing to order at the moment. So it's a bit of as you can imagine, if they're not cheap. So, to go and just order 50 or even 10 and just have them sitting here waiting for someone with a vehicle that's warranted, is a bit of a risk for us. But we found that we're sort of getting them in now. CCS ones we can get in Australia within about 3 weeks. And then the Chatamos are about sort of 2 months to 8 to 10 weeks sort of thing at the moment. We've created a residential partnership with a company called RevCharge as well. So once we get the order, we pass the install over to them to then process through the install, work through the DNSP applications, all the approvals and so on.
Yeah, a few weeks to a few months sounds like a long time, in this world where we're used to ordering something online and it arrives the next day.
Yeah.
But of course, like you said, the units are expensive at the moment. I see on the RevCharge website, they're just shy of $12,000, which pretty squarely puts them in the enthusiast space. You've got to have someone who really is keen on the tech, who wants to get stuck in, who can see the value for the long term. And those people, to be honest, have been waiting years already. They've been watching the market. They've been learning about vehicle-to-grid for 2 years. So I don't think that the energy enthusiast is going to be put off by another month or two if they know that it's on the way.
No, that's right. And to be honest, all the interest at the moment is through the enthusiasts, and they're the ones that just want to. And we've actually had quite a bit of interest from people that actually are just doing it as a backup mechanism. They're not actually looking to use it for V2H or V2G. They're purely there because they are regional and they want to be able to have, my power's just gone out and probably won't be back on for 2 or 3 days. Well, I don't want to use a generator. And, now, especially with all this petrol fuel issues with, being able to get it and the price and so on, everyone's going, well, I'll just buy an old Nissan Leaf and just have it sitting there and use that, 30 or 40 kilowatt battery to just be a backup if I need it.
It's a great idea. And I actually, at the start of 2025, we had Tropical Cyclone Alfred come through the Gold Coast and northern New South Wales, and my power was out for, I think, close to 24 hours, and was able to, luckily, so I got the BYD Auto 3. It's got this, little socket that you can plug in and you get a little power board. So I had the fridge wired up to that and was running off that. And then the neighbor knocked on the door and they wanted to, they were like, oh, what's that power cord? And so they had their fridge running off the car as well. And I was kind of doing the maths on the kilowatt hours. I'm like, I think I've got 3 weeks of powering me and my neighbor's fridge off the car before we run into any issues. So I can definitely see the power of that. And if just having the potential to do that in those types of events is so valuable in those, in those regional areas.
Yeah, 100%. I know we had lots of conversations with people through that period as well. Oh, can you do this? Can you, it wasn't a thing then, but, all of a sudden some sort of, whether it's a cyclone, hurricane, bushfire, floods, natural disaster, all of a sudden it starts sparking people going, oh, I should be planning now. I should be planning and looking at what options they have. And so, while we don't want all these natural disasters happening, it seems to sort of spark the conversation around it all, and people start actually thinking about a bit of resilience if things do happen.
Yeah, very good. And so, look, we should have opened with this, but it's quite a feat that you've beaten a lot of very big names in the EV charging industry in terms of getting the first CEC approved vehicle to grid charger. Very, very notable names in the industry are still yet to have anything on that list. So can you give us a little bit of color without getting into too much detail in terms of what that process actually looked like?
Yeah. Oh, look, it was incredibly frustrating, but, for the right reasons. I think obviously history in this space with inverters or panels or even batteries, is if they're just going to let anything on the list, there's going to be more issues than, So the team that we dealt with was very thorough. And it has to be. It's just the way. While it was frustrating for us at the time, like you look back and you go, like, I'm really glad that they've made us do all this and crossed off absolutely everything. Because I think, especially in Australia, we want to be able to make sure we're installing decent products that aren't going to backlash on end users or the installation company, the suppliers, the manufacturers, and so on. We started our application went in March last year and didn't get touched till August.
Wow.
Yeah. So once an assessor picked it up, then it was about 2 or 3 months. And that was a lot of back and forth, almost every day, back and forth, question, add this, include, what's this? It was good because it was thorough. And for me, as the Australian representative for it, and for our business, I learned a hell of a lot more than I would have known, and not just about the product, but about the expectation of this in the industry.
Was it mostly an on-paper assessment, or was there some physical testing they did of the product as well?
No, I didn't. So, yes, we had to do physical testing, and we did that through TUV and got all the documentation and test reports, which were required. So obviously 4777.2 has been a big one. And I don't know, we had about 30 different documents that had to go through.
Yeah, well done on getting through that again. So look, if we start to look forward a little bit, obviously we're just at the cusp of vehicle to grid becoming possible. I think we're all hoping that a lot more car manufacturers jump on board in terms of allowing it under their warranties, which will surely open the market up to more people. But if we looked sort of 5-10 years ahead when, hopefully the battery warranties won't be a big issue, what do you think the vehicle to grid space might look like? Do you think those use cases that you originally thought with Jamie about in the regional areas will be available through public charging, or, do you have other ideas of where this might go?
Yeah, good question. Obviously the end user, the homeowner is going to be a big market. And that's, let's be honest, there's millions of people that could be interested in that space. I think it's powerful whether it's in that private space or that private commercial space as well. So if you're a fleet owner and can have a bank of these lined up where we obviously know there's a lot of fleets out there, whether it's the Woolworths and Coles pick and collect, what do they call it? Click and collect trucks that are constantly parked up, but also constantly on the road. So that, FedEx, they're all starting to move into this space now. And I think that sort of fleet that could be parked up over the evenings that could help support local suburbs or towns, through an injection of power if they're needed, and reduce the need for, cranking up all the coal turbines or the, those sorts of things where we save, like the nation saves billions of dollars because we don't have to do that because we've got these battery banks that are just parked up. I just think like as a nation sort of wide picture, that's going to have a huge impact. So I think it can play a big part in Australia, no matter what area. I think the commercial space and fleets and potentially public charging could play a massive, massive difference in the next 5 years if there's the uptake.
I think that we have to expect that fleets are going to have a fantastic use case and real value to add when it's a bit more developed, because they literally just have these masses of batteries sitting on wheels that are almost definitely going to be not in use for their primary purpose of driving vehicles at some part of the day, whether it's evening, daytime, shoulder periods, depending on the business model and the type of vehicles. Those batteries are going to be dormant at a time that will have some type of benefit. So as businesses start to, obviously right now we're seeing more and more businesses transition their fleets to electric. That's step one. And then they'll start exploring those other options for how they can make the most of the assets that used to be just depreciating and now can play a very different role on the balance sheet.
Yeah, well, I think a positive sign is with Banton Australia, that business does a lot of work with councils, predominantly in South Australia because that's where we're based. But a lot of their tenders and their RFPs and stuff that are coming out now, they're all thinking about innovation. And so while they're looking at public charging or their fleet charging or whatever it might be within their district, they are looking for these innovation spaces. And that's where I think Vehicle2Grid can play like a large part, and councils are the ones that can push it into our like everyday life, because you talk about the fleet cars, like their pool cars might get used for 2 hours a day, otherwise they're sitting there doing nothing, but they've already got an EV charger there. And I don't know, the councils own a lot of property as well, and if they can help reduce costs for their local swimming centre or their gyms where they don't have to pay as high electricity bills, it becomes a bit of a circle. It's not just about electricity now. It's about you've reduced costs for the everyday people to be able to go and now do something that they might not have been able to afford because the membership was so expensive or the admission fee was expensive. You know what I mean? So like little things, but that's where my mind goes with it.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think it's very exciting what the potential is. I think there's a huge amount of potential even with the batteries that are already on the road, and we're at such a, I think we're still around 1% of vehicles being EVs. So there's just, the battery capacity that we're heading towards, Matt. So before we finish, if someone wants to get in touch with you, Matt, where should they head?
Yeah, no worries. So we've got our website, V2Grid.au. Please feel free to jump on that. On that has our info email address, but feel free to contact me directly. My email is matt@V2Grid, and that's V2Grid.au. That goes directly to me. So please, anyone out there, feel free to reach out, and we can chat all stuff bidirectional.
Thanks a lot, Matt, for making the time for us today. It's been a great chat and appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us.
No worries, guys. Thanks for having me. We'll hopefully speak again soon.
That's it for today. Thanks for listening, and make sure you share an episode with someone that you think might enjoy it. Leave us a review, leave us a comment. It really does make a difference for us. And if you need a quote for anything related to home electrification, solar, batteries, heat pumps, aircon, and of course EV charging, head to solarchoice.net.au to get instant quotes from pre-vetted installers. See you next month.